I like to tell people that until my late 20s, I barely noticed that I was a woman. I mean, it's kind of a funny thing to say, but I had this really quick metabolism, so I really didn't have body issues, and I wasn't super attractive, but I was attractive enough that, like my attention to myself as a woman didn't come about that way. I had parental support for what I wanted to do in life, so I didn't hit barriers career-wise. And so I really had very little interest in kind of any gender-related dialogues all the way through grad school. Never took a single course on gender or anything like that. Just didn't experience it as particularly relevant to my life. And so the place where it really hit me is when I became a mother. So I started late because I did the whole thing where you finish your doctorate and then start having children. And my oldest son was born when I was 29. And at that point, I wasn't in academia yet, but I was working as a clinician, and I basically was working as a professional. And I'm a practicing Christian, so I'm in especially this was, a couple of decades ago, I was in a relatively kind of conservative social environment and religious environment. And it absolutely astonished me how people started treating me differently once I had a child. I mean, it just caught me completely by surprise, right? So it was this new experience. I really was enjoying kind of having a baby and learning about that and that kind of thing. But then on the other hand, people were treating me as if I had, on the one hand, joined this exclusive club, right, where there were all these things to talk about with other moms, but every other aspect of who I was had just been flattened, had just disappeared. My accomplishments academically, my any input that I might have on just areas not related to mothering, I mean, just gone, right? Nobody saw me as anything but a mother. And it was, and especially again, in that day and age and in that environment, people were making expectations about what I would do. They were assuming that I would quit my work, abandon my clients, right? And become a full-time stay-at-home mom. And, all that caught me so by surprise. I kind of laugh as I look back now because I probably should have expected it more. But as someone with my training would do, I said, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's experienced this. And so I went to the academic literature. And sure enough, people were talking about things like motherhood ideology and work-family conflict, and I mean, just all kinds of areas related to it.
What recommendations would you give to people, especially women or mothers in particular, around these issues that are going on right now?
That's a very hard question. Yeah.
Sorry.
So much of it depends on resources that are available for kind of offloading some of that mental labor, right? And that's going to depend so much on each individual woman, right? So if there is a trusted partner who is willing, but maybe doesn't know how to pick up some of what the mother is carrying, then that's kind of a best case scenario. And it involves then carefully articulating what part of the load is being carried by the woman, and assessing the partner's willingness to pick up on that. The part that's challenging about that is it's not always that easy. I mean, we mothers tend to do the mental labor, but there's also an aspect of it that's tied pretty tightly to identity. And so I think that sometimes even when it is possible to delegate some of that to somebody else, to give over the responsibility leading to the mental labor to somebody else, that we are reluctant to do so, right? Because it's tied in very tightly with our identities as our motherhood ideologies, right? What moms are supposed to do. So that requires some psychological work on our parts to try to clarify what we want our motherhood ideology to be.
Your work to date are you most proud of?
Most proud of. I think I would have to point to my work on gender issues, especially with regard to it's not that I'm not proud of the later work, but the earlier work was being done when other people were not looking very much at the intersection between religion and. Hello, Miriam. This is CPS Pharmacy. That's funny. I pressed decline and it answered it. I think I would have to point to some of the research that I did early on, just because nobody else was really doing research on intersections between women's issues and religion back at that time. And I think that the reason that I'm proudest of that is because it has led to advocacy efforts that have changed the situation for women concretely, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, things like identifying what benevolent sexism looks like in a religious context and providing people with language that they can then point to when things are happening to them and they're not quite sure how to explain to somebody why this feels so bad.
Right.
And then they can draw on concepts that I've helped people to flesh out and have provided to them. That I think that's the part that I feel the most gratified by, you know.